Missions Draft League, season number 4. Today we've got the final recap of the regular season here for you. We are through our 7th and final week of the season. So we're going to go ahead and recap that, talk about how well I predicted this season, and then we will take a look at the standings, playoff schedule, stats, and we'll start talking about awards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. We have first the 10-star team versus the LA Charge Beams. Charge Beams ended up getting that win 2-0, pretty dominant as well, as Blood Moon and Chiyu both showed up and played super well. They ended up limiting Tensor's options quite a bit, as Golden Go was pretty mostly ineffective by my estimation. But yeah, by the time this game was played, it was already without playoff implications. However, even regardless of that, this match did eliminate Tensor from playoff contention. So that does mean that our defending Grand Champ will not be in the playoffs this season. Just kind of shows you how competitive this season was. Next up, we had the Season 4 Sweepers versus your Manchester Bewares. Bewares actually got that win 2-0. And this was a pretty big win, not in terms of playoff implications, as I stated last week. Both of these teams were locked into their seeding for playoffs, which basically meant that there was no difference of outcome here. However, I do think that it was pretty important for momentum, at least in the playoffs. Your Bewares ended up getting that win, which is their 4th sweep in a row. And despite kind of having some early difficulties with weeks 2 and 3, I do think that there is an argument that the Bewares are one of, if not the most dangerous team in the playoffs currently. So definitely look forward to that. Hopefully you also did watch that match, as I do think that it was worth watching. Definitely you could tell that there wasn't really anything on the line for either of these coaches, but I do think that it's still worth watching. Final game for the Dark Division is the Bitbreakers versus the Dream Park Duo Blades, and with this win, the Bitbreakers solidified themselves in the 3rd seed for the Dark Division, so big win for them there. The biggest thing about this is that despite being in kind of an awkward position by the end of the season, the Bitbreakers ended up actually turning things around. Now they did need help from the forfeit win over the Poke Rangers. Obviously we wouldn't know for sure if they would get that win over the Poke Rangers. However, I think that they played pretty well up to this point. They beat the teams they needed to beat, meaning the 3 teams below them, and at least one game cross-divisional, which kept them in the playoff race and was huge in actually making sure that they made the playoffs. So congratulations to the Bitbreakers there. For the Duo Blades, I've kind of been saying this all season, but I think that universality just kind of needs a little bit more help figuring out how they want to play VGC, and just in general how to play VGC. If they do come back, I hope that they reach out a little bit more, and yeah, we are always here to provide a little bit of help and make sure that everybody is happy and having fun. Next up, we had the Calgary Flareons versus the Sunset Rose Meowsticks. Big win for the Meowsticks here, as after all was said and done, they ended up earning the 2 seed. So really big win for them. An unfortunate loss for Celadon. I actually thought that Celadon had a pretty good matchup this week, but a couple of choices that I think were a little bit strange for my taste, as well as some play that definitely let him down a little bit. I do think that Rose is a dangerous coach, and although the team is not one that I super highly rate, it is being played at a high level here, so a dangerous one to look out for as well. Next up, we have the Infernal Infernapes versus the New York Poke Rangers. Big win for your Infernapes there, as they end up solidifying that #1 seed. They push the Poke Rangers all the way down to 3. So this was a pretty big win here. I did not see a ton from out of there, and it kind of tells me that perhaps these last 2 weeks were a little bit more of a slide than we were expecting from the Poke Rangers. They had a great start to the season and were super competitive with all of the best teams in the league. And I do think that there was maybe a little bit of like a schedule conflict that kind of just made it difficult to justify being super involved here. So I do expect him to kind of turn it up for the playoffs. But, you know, not too much to be concerned about as he still made the playoffs. As for the Infernapes, earning that 1 seed is huge. I was a little bit concerned earlier on in the season because it felt like the Infernapes kept going to 3 games in matches where they should have had a more dominant win. However, it turns out, even if you're winning the games in a close manner, a win is a win, and I do think that they are a very dangerous team for everybody this season, and I hope that they can show that off a little bit more coming in the next couple of weeks. Final game of the season, we have the Cretaceous Draco Meteors beating the Booming Swamperts in a 3-game set. The Draco Meteors, with this win, would have secured at least the 3 seed here. However, with Dale's feelings about the season, he ended up deciding to drop before the playoffs. You know, just not feeling it and didn't want to end up taking the playoff spot from somebody else who is having more fun and feels more dedicated to this. So, despite that, this was a pretty interesting game, and I do think that Pokemon Queen played really well in a match that was really difficult. And I do think there was more than a couple of scenarios where they ended up getting this win. So, in my mind, big congratulations to the Booming Swamperts and Pokemon Queen, as despite this being kind of a whimper at the end of the season, you showed a lot of promise, and I do think that perhaps with a little bit stronger team that is more built around, even if it is your favorites, I do think that Pokemon Queen is certainly capable of threatening for a playoff spot. So congratulations there. And with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the predictions we made for this season. So we had an excellent string of predictions this season. What can I say? I am just the GOAT when it comes to predicting. We ended up getting 5 out of the 6 games during week 7, correct. And this ended up finishing our regular season predictions with a 31-11 record. That is absolutely incredible. We got more than 2/3 of all games correct, which is absolutely fantastic. Even predicting a couple of upsets earlier on in the season correctly. So a huge season of predictions there. Hopefully we can also get our predictions correct for the playoffs. Which, that being said, I will post this in the Discord as well, but we are going to be running a bit of like a March Madness bracket just to see who can predict the playoffs the best. Now, before we get to the playoff bracket, here is your standings. Representing the Dark Division, we have the Season 4 Sweepers, your Manchester Bewares, and the Bit Breakers in that order. So your Season 4 Sweepers will get a round 1 bye, as they get an automatic bid into the semifinals. The other 2 teams here have to make it through the quarterfinals in order to make it to the semis. Representing the Light Division, you have the Infernal Infernapes, the Sunset Rose Meowstics, and the New York Poke Rangers in that order. Like with the sweepers, the Infernapes get that round 1 bye, meaning they have an automatic bid into the semifinals and only need one win to make it to the grand finals. Everybody else has got to play their way into the semis to have a chance at the grand finals. And this is what the playoff bracket is going to look like. On the top side, you have your Sunset Rose Meowstics taking on the Bit Breakers. Should be a really fun match there. And the winner gets the honor of taking on the Season 4 Sweepers in the semis for that spot in the grand finals. On the bottom side, you've got your Manchester Brewers taking on the New York Poke Rangers, and that will be for a spot in the match versus the Infernal Infernapes in the semis for a shot at the grand finals. So, pretty easy predictions here. Make sure that you get your brackets in. Who's going to win quarterfinal match number 1? Who's going to win quarter match final number 2? And then who's moving on from the semis into the grand finals, and who do you got as the champion? Exciting stuff there. I will be putting my bracket out here at some point, and hopefully we will see a really exciting playoffs, as I do think that there is a discussion that this might be the biggest, most competitive bracket we've ever had. I think before the final week of the season, you could have said that there was at least one team that was super ahead of the curve, aka undefeated. However, every team this season has shown cracks in the armor, and while there are a couple of what I would call matchup dependent games here, I do think that there is a lot of fun games to be played, and just about everybody can win this season. So let me know what you think, and let's finish by talking about stats and awards. Your final stats for the regular season are as follows. Your top 10 includes Primarina, Dragonite, Basculegion F, Golden Go, Hariyama, Iron Crown, Ogerpon Hearthflame, Entei, Ursaluna Blood Moon, and Heatran. And I gotta say, this is probably the most populated KOs stats that we've ever had. And the reason for this actually is because this is probably the only season where we've only had one forfeit game. Obviously, you want to try to end the season without any forfeit games. So, a bit unfortunate that we did have one, but still, this is awesome to see that we have a little bit more fleshed out stats. And yeah, you can definitely see who the most influential Pokemon this season were. Of course, this top 3 was mega influential, so congratulations to all 3 of these teams that had all 3 of these very impactful Pokemon. Going a little further down, you do start to see some support Pokemon, not really focused on doing damage, but did get those wins. Namely, I'm looking at a Pokemon like Klefki, and of course, lower down, Clefairy, who didn't get any KOs, but ended up winning 8 games. So, huge for that Pokemon. The final things that we had, of course, was the awards. Now, this has a lot to do with the regular season. Of course, we do have a couple of things tied to the playoffs, but we will be getting into the awards here very soon. Of course, we have already crowned our light and dark champions, so congratulations to BigBot and 616 for getting those. And from here, we have got the rest of our awards to fill out, so I'm going to remind you guys one more time. Pokemon or coaches cannot win any 2 awards, just because we want to be able to celebrate multiple Pokemon here. Of course, this changes when we go from regular to playoff. If the regular season MVP ends up being the playoff MVP, then they deserve to be so. So let's make sure that we celebrate everybody as best we can here. We're probably going to start off here with some of the not wanted awards. Of course, we have the Chococaller, the most useless Pokemon, and biggest surprise, which can also be a good surprise. After that, we've of course got our best match, best trade, best defensive Pokemon, which I think should probably be changed to best support Pokemon, as defense is not really a thing in VGC. Of course, you can be survivability based, but you still have to end up winning the game somehow. So we will probably be changing the name of that award. And then finally, best offensive, all culminating in the MVP of the season. So that is exciting, of course. I look forward to voting, and hopefully I will see you there. Make sure that you stay tuned for the playoffs, and make sure to cheer on your Manchester Beavers, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.